Welcome to the Liberation Lab podcast, insights and interviews for the disruptive educator. I'm excited to have my guest. I'm going to let him introduce himself. So why don't you tell the people who you are, what you do, and why you do it?
All right. I'm so glad to be here. I'm Colin Seal. I am a proud Brooklyn native, although I currently reside in Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm a math teacher. My heart of my heart is I'm a math teacher, middle school and high school math teacher. Went to law school at night and I realized that there was something so different about that approach to thinking and analyzing the world. So that all led me to be doing the work that I've been doing over the last 8 years, which is leading Think Law, really revolutionary model that tries to bring access to critical thinking to everyone as our very clear form of what it would mean like to have equitably designed learning spaces for kids that truly teach kids not just to look at the way it is, but get them to have all the tools they need to create the world as it ought to be. So that's what we do across the country, working with districts on their tier one curriculum, working with districts on our actual curriculum that uses real life legal cases in upper grades, fairy tales and nursery rhymes in lower grades, because a lot of these fairy tale characters are very questionable, very suspect. We hold them up to task, and it's just the work we do with teachers, with families, with administrators. It's all about building systems where we don't need to rely on magic anymore because there's a system for it.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to lead off, that's a way to lead off, sir. So you said a lot there. I think, some things that resonate with me is particularly you don't need the magic because there's a system. That for me, especially like now sitting in, and we just talked about it offline, but like the admin seat where, I've crossed over to the dark side, if you will, from being a teacher, and you see like there are pockets of excellence, pockets of equity, or at least a semblance of it. And then you see there's a bunch of spaces where it doesn't exist, where there are mindsets and habits and systems that work to almost the destruction of any type of formation of equity. Now, before we touch there, I think about, and I want to say it this way. I think about my formative years in school. I think about my sixth grade year in particular, because in my sixth grade year, I was sitting in a class. I was one of two black students. It was the honors program at my school, and I was going through a lot at home. And going through a lot at home had really pent up anger. It was a really hard year for me. Fast forward to the fourth marking period, I strived really hard because I didn't want to get kicked out the program, and I got on a roll the last marking period. But prior to that, it was B's and C's. And the teacher wrote on the report card, because this back then when you could handwrite on that thing. And she said, "This student does not belong in the honors program." And I never forgot those words. I never forgot what it looked like. I never forgot what a penmanship looked like. And it drastically changed how I went about schooling, even up until college. The reason I bring that story up is because I think our experiences in education kind of lend themselves to the efforts we're making on this side. So talk to me about little Colin going to school and what that experience was like for you.
So, man, that's a tough thing. That's one of those feelings where it's like, to make that statement, like you might forget what somebody said, but you never forget how they made you feel.
Yeah.
I definitely felt that. And I think, there's this space of, there's all the acronyms, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging.
Yeah.
And that belonging piece is very, very interesting because when it comes to the space of being black and brilliant at the same time, being brown and brilliant at the same time, being poor and brilliant at the same time, being the child of immigrants and being brilliant at the same time, it can feel like, man, it's like a whole sort of like mind-defying thing for people to be able to conceptualize, right? So I remember I was much younger. I was in first grade, second grade, getting in trouble all the time, at least once a week, getting in trouble on some stuff. And like one of the people that I had a real issue with was this lady who did our science lab stuff. She would come and do a little science lab stuff with us, like STEM before they were calling it STEM. And I'm in Brooklyn. Her name happens to be Miss Lifshitz. And I was really mad. Like, why you getting mad at me? Because your name is Miss Lifshitz. Like, what am I going to do with that name? Your name is Lifshitz, okay? So I end up clearly getting in all these shenanigans, all this trouble. And I was getting in trouble at least once a week for something dumb. And I remember being at a point where I also had a very bad speech impediment. And as I'm being assessed for speech services, I had this thing happen where they were like, well, I think part of the problem is Colin was supposed to be in gifted and talented classes since he was in kindergarten. My behavior challenges came from a lack of being challenged.
There it is.
What's very different about yours and my experiences, Bobby, is that when I got bused to this school that had a gifted program because my school didn't, this was still East Flatbush. So everyone in the classroom looked like me. So I no longer felt like some sort of a weird defective product because I was black and brilliant at the same time, because I was poor and brilliant at the same time, because I was a child of immigrants and brilliant at the same time. It all made sense. It was very natural to me. In fact, I didn't even know until I got to middle school that I was a nerd. I didn't even know. I had no clue. I never got that memo. It never got delivered to me. So I remember this feeling of having such a strong sense of scholarly identity. Those things that you sometimes hear people say, you're like, oh, yeah, like, oh, you're doing all that work. You're acting white. I'm like, I never knew what that even meant because I didn't know any white kids. There wouldn't be a framework for that. You saw white kids on TV and that was about it. Yeah. And one of the things that's really important about bringing up that story is that in my mind, how that transformed me as an educator was I never really thought about closing achievement gaps. Because whether you want to call it an achievement gap, opportunity gap, I don't really care. But if the goal of whatever gap closing experiment you're doing is to do as good as white kids who aren't doing all that great to begin with, I'm not really with that. But if you're talking about shattering the achievement ceiling, setting that stage for excellence, it's very, very, very different. And going back to this idea, there's a very interesting movement around a lot of equity leaders of color who say things like, I don't believe in gifted education. And my comeback is always like, all right, cool. So you must believe in magic. Well, what do you mean? Well,
talk to me about that.
If you look at Mae Jemison, first black woman, NASA, space, all that stuff, right? Look at her life.
Yeah.
Look at her life. It just so happened that she happened to be a child of the kind of mom in CPS, Chicago Public Schools, that you don't mess with, right? Like if my daughter gets a B, we having a conference. So she already had that kind of thing built in. It just so happened that when she was at a high school that didn't offer advanced math, her algebra teacher took his prep period. And come on now, let's not act like we don't understand how strict union rules are in places like Illinois, right? Like take your prep period to offer calculus, even though it's not even offered, because he believed that where she was going, she was going to need it. So I look at that and I snap my fingers and say black girl magic. But what if magic wasn't necessary? You know, like there's this moment in the Matrix I think about so often when Morpheus is talking to Neo and Neo's like realizing his powers. He's like, so what are you saying? Are you saying I could dodge bullets? And he said, no, by the time we're done, you don't have to. You won't have to.
Yeah.
What we're out here doing is like, well, how can we dodge bullets? Be an exception to the rule. Be black boy magic, black girl magic. But what if we didn't have to do magic? We can just go to school. Just go to school. Just learn. Just do what we're asked to do. And what we're asked to do is something that forces us to think deeper in critical thinking on a regular basis. To really be able to get to a point where, look, you know, you and I have a very common background around very much valuing culturally responsive pedagogy, culturally responsive and sustaining education, right?
100%.
And yeah, our kids need to be able to see all kinds of things that show them stories about who they are and reflections of who they are. But if we're really getting it right, our kids should be able to see themselves in every damn thing. In every damn thing. I've never read a Dickens, a Shakespeare, a Nathaniel Hawthorne that I didn't see myself and my story in. Because I just got tweaked that way. It's the way that I learned to sort of appreciate everything that I'm looking at. When I'm a computer science graduate, every line of code, every product that we're creating, I'm seeing it from the same kind of lens. So this is where I feel like this conversation around gifted needs to change. one of the things I'm excited about is April 12th to 14th, the nonprofit arm of Think Law, the B Project, is
Mm-hmm.
hosting a conference called Gifted in Color in Austin. And the whole idea here is we're doing something very, very different. We're centering a different kind of conversation that you don't typically see in
Yeah.
education. We're talking about the voices and experiences of Black, Hispanic, Indigenous scholars, practitioners, and even kids
Yeah.
involved in gifted education and advanced academics. Spaces that are usually places where they say, hey, Bobby, I'm not sure you're honors material.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not sure you're gifted material. Or, Colin, you're gifted, but because I was identified gifted at 7 years old, diagnosed with ADHD at 37 years old.
Wow.
Right. So I got, oh, you're gifted, but you talk too much. You're gifted, but you're very disorganized. You're gifted, but it doesn't seem like you really care to complete some of these tasks. And I'm always like, again, if we've got a system for excellence, there's no
Yeah.
such thing as gifted, but unless you're Sir Mix-a-Lot. Sir Mix-a-Lot can talk about gifted butts all he wants. That's him. But like as educators, we can't be in that space. We got to obsess with the excellence on the table and how do we unlock it? That's what it's about. That's what we got to do.
So a couple of things there. I think I always worry when there are people in spaces talking about liberation, talking about equity, talking about justice, and everything that they say. And this isn't at you, Colin. So follow me. I'm going somewhere. Um, they're everything that they say is always advice for somebody else, but never reflecting or saying like, "Yo, I'm challenged by this right now." Right? Because there's
Mm.
always an ongoing process of unlearning, learning, and things like that that need to take place. And so I want to say right now in this moment, I'm being challenged by what you're saying
Mm.
because my problem, and I put this out there a lot, is for liberation to be, and I frame everything I do under that, right? Because I believe in it. But at the same time, one of the things that I'm noticing about myself and one of the things I'm unpacking is any type of movement towards justice, any type of movement towards liberation or equity, tangible equity, shameless plug, any type of move towards those things requires you to dream bigger, to dream better. And when I say that, I mean what you said about dodging bullets. I think it's so easy to sit there because we've been socialized in it. We don't think that there's anything else possible.
Mm.
Systems where magic isn't required, Colin? Have you
Mm.
gone mad? What do you mean? How does
Mm.
that? Because every day I'm getting up and I have to dodge bullets, Colin.
Mm.
I have to be magic. I have to show them that, a black male educator, a black male principal is, competent, is, supportive, is all the thing. I have to do that to exist in this present system. So when you say create a system where that doesn't happen, how do we do that? Right? It's like it's part of the tension there. Does that make
So,
sense? Go ahead.
and what you bring up is really important. And what it is we have to accept our role
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
as actors within the system. I think it's really easy. You talked about
Yeah.
that individual
Yeah.
reflection, right? It's really easy to be like,
Yeah.
well, yeah, the system this and system that. But if we don't see ourselves at the system, we're tripping. We're
A
losing
hundred
it.
percent.
Like
A
we
hundred percent.
are the
Yeah.
system. If the system moves, it's going to be because of what we do. And oftentimes it won't move because of what we don't do,
There it
whether that's
is.
individually, collectively, whatever that is. And the thing that I like to think about, and I talk about this in Tangible Equity, my second book, I talk about this idea that had this experience with Inroads, and I bet you a lot of your listeners might know the Inroads program, right?
Yeah.
Really seeking a lot of Black and Brown talent to
Yep.
give us the pathway in the corporate America. That's the whole model, okay? So I never forget being in Syracuse, going to this thing my freshman year, wearing my best suit, and everyone is sitting there, kids from Brooklyn, kids from Philly, everyone's in there, all decked out as well as we could. And then we split up. Girls and boys split up, different rooms. And we're in these rooms, and they're telling stuff like, yo, that facial hair? Nah, but gotta get rid of that.
Mm.
Oh, those like braids, like cornrows, crazy, outrageous. Like dreadlocks, dreadful. No, not gonna happen. Like,
Mm.
and all these things that I'm like, yo, so like this is wild. This is a whole program about like diversifying the corporate workforce. But what are the benefits of this diversity if from the jump you asking me to leave who I actually am at the door?
At the
All my
door. Come
style,
on,
all my
Colin.
swagger, all those things that are part of my identity that you so-called value. You value this. And I look at it, I'm like, okay, the people doing that workshop, they meant well. These are black and brown folks who like put in work. And like you, like our ancestors, this mantra, my family came from Barbados. My dad was locked up for a decade for selling drugs when I was a kid. I always was raised to understand I got to work twice as hard to get half as far.
Yeah.
My mom, my grandmother, same lessons. But I made a decision, Bobby. I'm not teaching that to my children. My kids are 7 and 10 years old. They never heard nothing like that in their life from me. They're not going to hear that because what my commitment is to creating space where they don't have to work twice as hard to get half as far. That's part of what I'm trying to do. It's got to become more just. At some point, we can't just settle for learning how to play the game. We got to get the tools necessary to slay the game altogether. Oh, you made it. You navigated the system. But was the system ever okay?
Yeah.
And I never forget. I go on a rant about this in the book about something I heard President Noguera talk about one time about like, well, how come so many black people play in the NBA? Okay, if there was racism, then black people would be in the NBA. I'm like, yeah, true. That's interesting. It's interesting, right? But like, no matter where you are in the nation, no matter where you are in the country, like a basketball hoop is 10 feet high. The rim has the same circumference and diameter. The free throw line is the same distance apart on every single court, right? Like, so we look at it and we say, hey, isn't that something? When the rules are standardized and enforced in a standard manner, talent translates to success. If you can stay healthy, if you have the ability, there's no real such thing as working twice as hard to get half as far. It is what it is. It is what it is. But can we say that about academics? Can we say that about academics? Well, we've got kids who are valedictorians of their high schools and go to college taking remedial everything. How is that possible? So when I think about this system, being part of the system, being part of creating something more just, I like to think about this as something that actually isn't very creative. What I'm talking about here is not something that requires massive shifts of the mind. One very concrete thing that we could do to start changing the way we do things is think about a world. It could be revolutionary, but actually it's very simple. Every kid every day has access to content in their tier 1 instruction that is at or above grade level and delivered in a challenging level, at least at the level of rigor that they're going to be assessed on. That right there. It's not cool enough to fit on a t-shirt, but if kids were getting this at or above grade level instruction delivered in a challenging way, it would change the game.
Yeah.
It would change the game.
But so let's dig in there, because if I'm a teacher and I have come from the factory mill known as teacher preparation programs, I've been handed some books, some curriculum, some things. I've been, quote, prepared to teach, and I get to school, right? And a couple things happen, right? So I want to be real here. Part of it, from the perspective of the teacher, is going to be, well, if I'm in 7th grade, then they've gone through years of education where, let's say, that didn't happen. So now when I'm teaching at the rigor at which they will be assessed at, and I'm pushing them, there is a defiance, we'll just say, so people know what I'm talking about. There is an anger. There is a sense of rejection of what I'm offering because they haven't had it prior to me. And now I got to deal with all the fallout. So me trying to espouse this tangible equity means now I have the headache of not bending to the system. What do you say to an educator who's experiencing that?
I think that we put far too much value on feeling comfortable.
My.
We love feeling comfortable. We love feeling good. And I never forget my first year teaching. Again, it never presumed to me. Like, I could hold two things in my head at the same time. I'm a big fan of and. We struggle with and sometimes in education, right? Like, I can say two things. I can say, one, all kids have gifts and talents. And there are some kids whose intellectual gifts and talents get them to a level where, without a specialized intervention around their gifts and talents, you actually can see this mismatch between their age and social development and their intellectual aptitude in ways that could come off very, very disastrous for Black and brown kids in particular. Okay.
Yep.
So when I start thinking about this space where I'm like, all right, it never occurred to me to teach any kid in any different way than I would have received my instruction as a gifted and talented kid. A couple of things come to mind here. Number one, meeting kids where they are.
Yes.
Okay, a lot of educators go, hey man, gotta meet kids where they are, meet kids where they are. I say, to hell with that. I'm not meeting kids where they are. If where you are is unacceptably below grade level, why am I meeting you there? I'm not meeting you there. I'm acknowledging where you are, but I'm assessing with everything you need to be where you need to go. Now, how I'm going to get you there, I'm going to use who you are. I'm going to use how you are to build up all we need to get there. Okay. And as I start looking at like the funk that comes with that, listen, the first test I ever gave, I remember this girl sat in front and center, took the test, crumbled it up, and threw it on the floor. And I was like, all right, I picked it up, unraveled it, put it on the desk, bam. Your test fell on the floor. I'm putting it back there. Crumbled it up again, put it on the floor. And I was like, you know what? You could do this. Like, stop doing it. I don't know what you're doing. Like, this is outrageous. I know you did this in class just the other day. But the idea of her having complex word problems in math was offensive to her. Who the hell do you think you are? No one's ever made us do word problems. Okay? And you come in here as a first-year idiot teacher trying to get us to do word problems? You must be crazy. I'm like, and I am crazy. And I'll own that. I'll own that. I have parents complaining so much when I taught in Vegas in particular. Mrs. Seal is crazy. Mrs. Seal's ridiculous. My kid always did good in math before Mrs. Seal's class. But your kid didn't necessarily know math.
Right.
You didn't really know it. Okay? So, like, my whole thing is challenge. It's good.
Yes, sir.
Challenge is good. Right? Like, we want our kids to experience productive struggle. We want our kids to be able to grapple with challenges life throws at them.
Yeah.
And I don't think that kids ever get told that who they are and how they are at home and in their community actually has a lot of academic value if we actually talk about it. If we actually talk about it. How we got kids that can ride the subway up and down the street, never get hustled, ever. But they get hustled by test makers? Mm-hmm. You know, we're talking about, oh, these tests are racist. But these tests are a game that our kids can play because our kids have game. They've got game. But we never tell them that the game that they have applies here. But it does.
Right. Right.
If I told any kid or any teacher, any adult, like, all right, we got an ELA passage, has 3 paragraphs in the title. What are going to be the top 4 wrong answers on that test? It's going to be, if I'm asking the question, what's the main idea? Got a title and 3 paragraphs. We already know what the dumb answers are going to be. The title, the first sentence, the last sentence. Any sentence with an exclamation point, you know damn well. People, oh, they must have really meant that, right? So if you know how to play the game, then you can slay the game. Yeah. We don't even talk about it. We act like there is no game. We act like, teach it to the test. Well, first of all, let's stop being ridiculous. We want to give our kids access to this jacked up game. They better know the test format. They better understand how to show up. Look, when I got to law school, I graduated top of my class. When I applied to law school, I scored in the 96th percentile on my LSAT. That's significant because I applied to law school after the deadline for application. After. I decided I want to go. And even though I came in after, my scores were undeniable. And there's this level of like, the system that we're in right now still requires some of that magic, right? It still requires it, right? So I'm not ignorant to where we are now, right? I have to kind of wear my credentials on my forehead sometimes in some of these spaces. At the same time, I want to have like underachieving, mediocre Black, brown, and indigenous kids come out of high school, drop out of college, and get billions of dollars from venture capital to do something stupid and fail and be ridiculous. I want a Hispanic kid that came from my neighborhood in Brooklyn to go out and do a fire festival with Ja Rule and get millions and millions of dollars to do a fire festival with no plan. That's what I want. That's justice. When we could just be mediocre, when we could be actually below average and still get opportunities handed to us. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's what that looks like, to see it be a much more level field. Now, I don't really want that. I don't
Right.
really want that. I want Black excellence
Right.
to still stand for something, but I don't want Black excellence to be a requirement for barely scraping by.
That's good, Doc. The average kid is going to walk into a classroom tomorrow, even, right? Whenever they hear this podcast. And they're going to walk in, and when we talk about equity, we talk about the invisible backpack, right? We talk about the things that students walk in. And what I love about your framing is it deals with teacher mindsets. It deals with it, like, you don't shy away from the rigor conversation, because a lot of times when we talk about equity, people dumb down rigor to talk about the emotional supports and the things that our kids need, which then we pathologize, if you will, Black and brown people and say, oh, they must all be dealing with something and that's why they can't do X, Y, and Z, versus the game is rigged and it's against us, and we have to teach them how to navigate this thing so it becomes a system and not magic, like you're talking about. So if I'm a teacher now, and I know, okay, even my framing of equity might be missing the mark because I've been taught to look for one thing, but you're encouraging another. What advice do you have to help me navigate? What mindsets do I need to have in order
Sure.
to enact this tangible equity, please?
So, my first two books kind of talk about this. So, Thinking Like a Lawyer talks a lot about the critical thinking gap and the belief gap
Yep.
that's in that, right? This idea that,
Yep.
like, if I don't believe that all kids can actually learn at a high level, and even if I do believe it, if I don't believe that I have the ability to actually make that happen as a teacher, if I don't believe my own efficacy as a teacher, then I'm going to see this struggle. Okay.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think one of the things I've realized over the 8 years of doing this is that perhaps I placed too much value on the idea of teacher mindset. When I started talking to teachers that said things like these kids can't, and I actually heard them out, they never really meant that these kids can't. What they were doing was confessing, I have no clue. I have no clue how to create the learning environments such that all kids can. What sometimes sounds like a gap in will is more often a gap in skill. How do we create
Yeah.
the tools
Yeah.
that teachers need so they can actually make this happen?
Yeah.
How do they make it happen? And one of the things that I say is this, right? Like, teacher prep teaches us some weird things. For instance, somehow a lot of teachers have been trained that differentiation means that, like, there's assignment A, B, C, and D. And I've got these 4 different assignments that kids are going to be doing at the end of this lesson. But if I
Yep.
look at it, like, the A level is like so low, so
Yep.
basic that I'm like, that's not even a thing. That doesn't even show that they met the standard. Really, the D level is where everyone needs to actually be. Like that complex word problem, that complex writing prompt. But like, we're not even giving kids an at-bat at that opportunity.
Yeah.
So what if we simplified it? We said, yo, screw A, forget B, never mind C. D is where kids need to go. How do we get them there? How do we get them there? And that's
Yeah.
the obsession. That's the obsession, right? Like, and you think about how do we get to this point? Part of what we try to preach is we can't make it one more thing.
Yeah.
There's not going to be a magic bullet in terms of a curriculum that's going to do that. So I was in Milwaukee the other day, comprehensive high school, and the class, they did a workshop with me one day. The very next day, they were putting these strategies into practice, okay? Class started out with a question, U.S. government. What would it look like if every state had its own currency? And this kids were on fire. They were going back and forth. Like, I don't want your stink Illinois money. It's all this stuff they were talking about, whatever. And the lesson was a lesson on U.S. monetary policy. Not the most interesting topic in the world, but they had a hook. And that hook got them thinking. They got a why. And like, it was going to come back on the other end, right? Because now they'd be like, all right, every state doesn't have its own currency. But what are your critiques of what the federal government does do when it comes to money? Is there a better way? And now, as a part of understanding this lesson, right? I started with a high level question. So I did critical thinking, even though no background knowledge was really needed. And by the end of it, my kids were not just learning about the monetary system the way it is, they were getting the chance to think through what it ought to be. This is how you build curriculum around liberation, around possibility, around actually creating the equitable structures by modeling what it is to be the change.
Yeah.
That's what it is, right? So, like, I think a lot of our strategies talk about in my tangible equity book is like finding the funk. Like, where's the drama? Where's the controversy? Where's the conflict? I got two algebra problems. Both equations are done wrong. Which wrong is more right? Why can't my kids go back and forth about that? Right? Like, these are the things where I could be in English. I got one paragraph, bad grammar, one paragraph, poor organization, one paragraph, technically perfect, but didn't answer the question. Which one should get a higher grade on your writing rubric? Because maybe my kids ought to know what it feels like to think like an English teacher.
Yeah.
If I can think like an English teacher, then when I'm doing this kind of writing, it just gives you that extra level of game. I need to have game.
Yeah.
Make the implicit explicit. There's no such thing as soft skills. There's things that some kids get intentionally taught and things that other kids don't get intentionally taught. Which camp do we want to be on?
Yes, sir. And to your point, like, it's affirming some of the things that I've been thinking about and doing, because to your point, the teacher that walks into the classroom, for example, because I was going to bring up a math problem, and we're both math teachers. I did that at middle school. I didn't go to high school like yourself, sir. I stopped once I get to Calc 2. It gets fuzzy for me. So much respect to you. But in middle school, when I'm teaching the Pythagorean theorem, or if I'm teaching 1 and 2 step equations, because that's a big part of the 7th grade curriculum, especially in Jersey, right? And I'm thinking about that, and I'm like, well, how do I get them to see this differently? So it's not just the mundane, here's our warm up, here's a couple problems, how do I get them to see the significance of this, or even the skills to do this in their outside world? Because not everybody's going to need the Pythagorean theorem, but you will need, like you said, critical thinking. You will need how to take something and apply it somewhere else. You will need, like, there's a bunch of skills that you will need that may or may not have to do with you applying the Pythagorean theorem. You may not need it in terms of, being a carpenter and having to build something that supports a wall or whatever have you. You may not need that. But you will need a lot of other things. So now, like, I'm the teacher that has to get up tomorrow. I'm looking at my lesson plan. I've been inspired by you, Colin. Cool. I want to do it. But I still got this boring ass curriculum that I still got to use. How do I make some practical shifts to do what you're talking about?
So, as someone that taught algebra 2, as someone that taught pre-calculus, I could be honest, sometimes it's hard to find those kinds of things, right? So I think there's two ways of looking at it. One, be explicit about the game. Call the game what it is, okay? Like, I used to tell my kids a lot, like, listen, you're taking pre-calc. You are college bound. There will never be a day in your life where you're going to be walking around graphing polynomials. It doesn't happen. If you're in a job that even requires you to know what a polynomial is, more than likely software is doing that for you, right? So this is not even really a thing. But what it is just a thing to send a signal out into the universe. It's part of the game. The game doesn't trust anything that happens, okay? And the truth is, when colleges are looking to admit you to a spot or give you money, they want to feel comfortable that you're worth the risk. One of the ways that they assess that you're worth the risk is that if you can deal with hard stuff, persevere, and do well, then they can feel like you probably can handle college stuff. And the reality is, some of the stuff you do in high school, the pacing of it, the rigor, like the AP coursework, is much more rigorous than any individual college class will ever be. So it is a vote of confidence and a signal into the universe that makes it that your transcript from this institution that might be of dubious quality depending on how it's being looked at actually has real value, and that you can actually come here and do it. It's part of the way that we have that cred, part of the way that we build up the capital that's not given to us from social capital alone. Right? Like, we don't have the names on our buildings of we don't have the legacy emissions. Like, so we got to figure out our own way to create our own right now legacy. And sometimes that right now legacy is in terms of ridiculous levels of achievement. I want to be in a space where that's not the case, but that's kind of what it looks like right now. But even with that said, I think this example is in my tangible equity book. Like, I was in a pre-calculus class in Denver, and I'm like, yo, they're doing composition functions, and everybody has it right. When I taught that, every kid had problems with that. And this was the first year teacher. I'm like, what did you do? He had no magic algorithm, whatever. I'm like, he chose violence. That's what he did. He started that day's lesson. And for y'all don't know, right? F of g of x, g of f of x is when you got one function, you plug in a value, you plug it into the other one. It's a whole thing. It's a whole lot of work.
Process, yeah.
But he started the class with a topic more controversial than abortion, immigration, taxes, whatever. He decided to ask the question about whether it was okay to put pineapple on pizza. And kids were going in. Like, oh, you are really gross. You pineapple on pizza, that's equivalent to genocide. Yo, you know what? Chill out. Eat the pizza I want to eat. Don't be judging me, whatever. But then they're like, all right, now I want you to visualize pizza on a pineapple. Like, well, that's ridiculous, right? Can't have a big pineapple slice and put a little bit of pizza. That just sounds crazy, right? But for whatever reason, that visual of something that was relevant, something that was outrageous, something that spoke to where teenagers were, blew up. And conceptually, he had no more work to do. I don't understand why, but he created meaning through the experience, through discourse, through funk. Like, a lot of times we have this thing where kids design their own multiple choice responses based off of likely errors. Kids look at two things that are both wrong, debating which wrong is more right. Kids play Family Feud. Like, what's kind of like, so we can create these experiences that are like, yo, it's bigger than the math. It's about us. It's about our scholarly community. It's about digging deep. It's about growing. It's about the idea that we still got kids who get in trouble for talking all the time.
Yeah.
Talking is just thinking out loud. Yeah. What if we created spaces where kids can be disruptive on purpose? Disruptive with a purpose.
Yeah.
That's the point. That's what we're going towards.
So you on my road now, because when I started this podcast, the trailer says, "Welcome to a journey in disruption." And the reason that I framed it that way is because, just like you're talking about in your book with your words now, and so much of what you do on an everyday basis is the status quo ain't gonna cut it. What we got now ain't working. We all know it. But the problem is we look at disruption like it's all wrong, right? The kid that stands up or in our class and disrupts they are the signal that lets us know something's wrong, right? In the same way in our body, right? When you have a headache, that's a disruption to how you normally feel, but it lets you know something deeper is at work, is at play, if we're willing to see it that way. So our kids, when they disrupt, when the teacher's mad about something that didn't happen the right way and they disrupt, all of that is a signal of something deeper if we're willing to see it that way. But I think often, go ahead.
To speak to the, like, just, I always like to ground things in the reality of like where we actually at, right? What are we actually working with, right? Because absolutely. I go to high school, I go to middle schools. I would say today in most of our schools, especially since the pandemic, the complaints that I'm seeing more of isn't about the disruptions. It's the apathy. It's the apathy.
Yeah.
It's the kids on a cell phone. It's the kids want to head down. And it's kind of like, there's a level of like, it's almost just to be real, because we can't do human work without humanizing ourselves, right? Like,
100%.
Hey, man, this actually hurts my feelings. Like, I'm playing some bomb stuff, and like, you over here just with the head in the desk, and you're not responding at all, or you on your phone or whatever. And it's like, there's this level of like, man, like, ask anybody, ask any middle school teacher. I'll take disruptive, rude, talking smack all day over like checked out any day. Checked out is hard. Checked out is hard. And it's sometimes hard to kind of feel like, man, like, look, there's a level of humility. There's a level of humility. There's a level of understanding the agency of young people to recognize that, like, hey, you know what? We have a choice. We have a choice. So one of the schools I'm working at where apathy had been a big problem, the master plan was to think about what it would mean for us to be disruptors as educators. And as disruptions,
that's
what they did, it's very different, Bobby. They said, what we're going to do is we're going to team up. In every single class period, we're going to invite, because it's usually only 2 or 3 kids per class. We're going to invite people warmly to participate 3 times every class period. Hey, we're doing this thing right now, and just wanted to check in on you because we're doing this and whatever. Like, hey, just making sure we're doing this. That's what we're doing. At a certain point, even the most obstinate young person would be like, you know what? Just stop talking to me. Okay, I'll do your stupid work. Just stop talking to me. I'm sick of it. Like, you're disrupting this thing. Because what you don't realize is a lot of times hiding worked. Okay?
Yeah.
Hiding worked. And hiding, in many ways, shows us something, right? Like, if I'm in a classroom where, like, if I just kind of lay low, I ain't gonna get called on. I ain't gonna get no trouble. I'm gonna be good. But like, if
Yeah.
we create spaces, was yo, I actually want you to be here.
Yeah.
It's like this annoying teacher I had for theater when I was in middle school. She said the corniest stuff, man. Like, oh, why don't you take off your jacket and stay a while? Oh, take off your coat and stay a while. I'm like, God, so annoying. But looking back, I'm like, she wanted us to be comfortable. She wanted us to feel like we weren't about to like run out the door. Like, take off your coat and stay a while. We didn't have lockers. We were in the hood. No lockers. So it's like, all right, take off your jacket though. And just sit there and like relax.
Yeah.
And I just thought to myself, like, are we willing to be obnoxious? I am.
Yeah.
I am. I'm very willing to be obnoxious. Am I willing to like deal with the thing like kids might be like resistant to the change that my disruption is going? Yeah, because if equity is comfortable, it ain't equity. Period.
That's it. That's it, sir. That's exactly where I was going with the disruption piece. Is that when it comes to the apathy or the disruption of the kids or even the curriculum, there has to be something within our education, something within our educators that says we have to disrupt this. We have to challenge. It has to be uncomfortable. We have to model what it looks like to be uncomfortable, because I think many of our teachers, at least in my experience, let me speak from my experience, there's a comfort level that says, all right, I offered it, I check the boxes, my duty is done. There is no call to disruption, because all I did was set the table with what the minimum requirements is for a healthy meal, to follow my analogy, and now
Mm,
I've done it all. You follow me? So
mm-hmm.
how do we call the apathetic teacher in the same way that we're saying the apathetic student needs to be called to disruption? How do we call the apathetic teacher to disruption? What is that going to look like for our system to actually access this tangible equity?
There's a framework that we talk about tangible equity. It's called the RAC framework, and a
Hmm.
lot of it, it's somewhat controversial. So people don't always like because like I don't understand what this means. I'm like, listen, I think it's important to humble ourselves a little bit and
Hmm.
recognize the power that we have. Just for a second, just recognize, like, as teachers, as educators, we have an enormous amount of power, right? You think about that sixth grade teacher. I also think about my second grade teacher,
Yeah.
okay, who I got in trouble for laughing too hard. And what kind of nonsense is that? How I get in trouble for laughing so hard? It doesn't make any sense. But I look at these things and I'm like, all right, what if I presumed that at any given moment, if I reflected long enough, there's something that I'm doing right now that is actively causing harm in my children in an inequitable way,
Mm.
right? Well, like some
Mm.
kids are harmed more than others. And I actually thought, and like, okay, like, what if that's the thing? What if everything that I'm doing could be subjected to that kind of analysis? So
Mm.
when I decided to make positive phone calls home, what did I really do? Who do I keep on calling for positive calls home? So something that I'm not able to see. Like, who am I missing?
Mm.
What do my kids think about the way in which my positive calls home were being distributed? If I think about the kids that I went through teaching in Washington, D.C., in Vegas, what ways did my own educational trauma cause me to do this weird thing of like imposing tough love on my black boys when I was the one uniquely
Mm. Mm.
qualified to give them love? So if I could look at my stuff and say, black boys are my why, and yet I'm out here, the only black male on my team,
Yeah.
referring them twice as often as anybody else,
My.
then I can't sit here and rest on my identity.
Yes, sir.
We out here tripping if we think that like because we might resemble our kids' backgrounds or whatever, that like we can't do harm. Sometimes we could do even worse harm because we can normalize it.
There it is. Yes.
So yeah, that reflection practice is so important and we got to get over it. Like, yo, it sucks to realize these things you do are harmful to kids. Yeah, it would suck more if you kept on doing it because you were afraid to grapple with the reality.
That reflection piece is so key. Like, even as I sit here, like, I had today suspended a kid.
Mm.
When I tell you I suspend a kid every single time I feel it, like, I'm always asking, what could I have done differently? What could we be doing differently? What could have prevented this because I know, again, going back to what we were talking about, a player in the system. Like I know that suspension, right? We know it doesn't work. Like I know, like it's not going to change it. And I struggle with it. But I'm also a player in a system with a district policy that says if this happens, non negotiable, this is what you do. And so I'm reflecting consistently all the time about exactly what you're talking about because I know that is causing harm for some of my students. And yeah, we'll have a conversation after. Yeah, we'll talk about building a plan. And yes, I will work with them. And yes, it's not the first thing, it's not even the fifth thing that I do. But at some point it happened. And honestly, there's two things at work there. One, I want to feel it every time. If I don't feel it every time and I get numb to it, then I
Mm-hmm.
become just like so many educators that I see in these seats who even sometimes look like you and I, Colin, who
Mm-hmm.
have turned it off and said, this is just what we do. This is where they are. And then there's this quote alternative school that they need to go to where those kids go. I don't want to ever be there. I want to feel it every single time because I want to question and ask and dream and think anew and give second chances and hit the reset button. You know, I'm thinking back to old school Nintendo when there was no save and you hit that reset button, you had to start all over again. You know, I want to
Mm-hmm.
hit that type of reset. But I'll be honest, like speaking at a human level, I don't know. Like I don't know what
That's
that
absurd.
looks like in the present system. Go ahead. You're about to say something.
If it was easy, people would have figured it out already, and they just
Absolutely.
wrapped it around, right? But one of the things I think about is for kids that are on the most serious end of like, you know, just chronic challenges when it comes to things that would lead to a suspension and would lead to you having to pull out this thing and like, okay, like I'm left with no choice. I get very frustrated when I go to districts across the country. We work with 40 something states, and I see the superintendent's advisory council, and I see this, whatever, and I see like what? Like star athlete, honor student, AP kid, cheerleading captain, all these people. I'm like, all right, but like, are these the people that really have the pulse on what the school needs to turn the corner? Like, I get it,
Hmm.
right? But like, what's representation for the young person that you had to suspend? Is that person ever like spoken to about the way things ought to be? Like, clearly something is not working for them systemically, right?
Yeah.
And there's these challenges, but I often wonder, like, when we say things like student voice, what students? Like, or
Yeah.
community, family voice, like which families get
Which
to actually
families?
communicate in a way where they're heard, where they're
Yeah.
invited. You know, I once heard Mark Lamont talk at the Black Males Educator convening, maybe 2017 in
Yeah.
Philly. And he talked about, we complain all the time about, like, you know, parents who want to come to school, parents who want to come to school. But like, have we ever figured out or thought that for some of our parents, going to school is like returning to the scene of a crime?
There it is.
At what point are we going to them? At what point are we thinking about, yo, like, not the only place. We could go to a church, right, in the community. We can do at a community center. People feel much more comfortable. They feel more relaxed. They can take off their jackets and stay a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've never sat through a whole conference with one of my kids' teachers. I was like, I'm done. I gotta go. I gotta go. Because I just heard my daughter say that one of her goals, her first goal, was to make sure she doesn't get sent back when she goes online. Because like she's talking. She's talking when they go online to go to lunch. And she's talking, she has to go back on. And that's her goal? My girl's in school and that's her goal? To be at level 0? Nah. I gotta walk out. Because I can't be me in every space. Sometimes I gotta chill. I gotta like
Yeah.
hit the like slow motion button and just walk out and let their mom
Yeah.
handle some of that. Because I'm like, I can't even talk. I can't. I gotta save it for the bigger blow ups, the bigger
Yeah.
ones.
Yeah.
So
No, I think that's like you said, the that shift and that reframing of again who's in the room, how do we make this better, and including those voices is major. 'Cause like you said, it doesn't happen often. So I want to ask you a couple questions as we round out our time. I want to honor your time
okay,
and thank you for sharing space with me. Um, I want to ask you if you let's go here. If you had three wishes that you
mm,
believe would revolutionize education as we know it, what would you wish for and why?
jeez. One of them is not as tangible. Okay, I'm
Oh,
gonna start there.
okay.
I want to be able to feel like it's not either or. sometimes it feels either or.
all the
It's
time.
like either I can go to spaces and bring my children to spaces where they feel like welcome, loved, supported, nurtured, and all of that, or I can send them to a place where they can have high levels of academic challenge, high levels of academic rigor, and opportunities that flow from that. And it feels like it's hard to get both. I wrote an
Yeah,
article a few years ago with my kid's mom asking the question like, do we need a green book for education?
yeah,
The idea of
yeah,
a green
yeah.
book of like you have to find
I
safe
read that,
spaces
John.
to
Yeah,
to
yeah,
go
yeah.
travel during a time where travel wasn't safe and you couldn't always go in every hotel. But like, do we need a green book to say like, yo, this place is actually good for us, right? And sometimes good for us doesn't always mean that there's a certain percentage of black kids there or brown kids there. It's like, yo, right here, the kids get taken care of. They're actually seen as whole humans, and the love is real. It's real. It's real. It should have to pick between love and pushing me academically. It should be connected, and I feel like it's a choice. I feel like that's a choice that we're constantly having to make as families in our positions, and I think it's a lot to send kids to spaces that you were in, Bobby, and say, "Hey, you're not honest material. Why are you here?" I don't want any kid
Yeah,
to have to relive that.
yeah.
So
That's good.
that's a big one. That's a big one. On a more practical sort of thing, I really, 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 really would love people to stop acting like there's some cavalry coming. Like there's some silver
Mm,
bullet that's gonna come save everything. There's not gonna be this next curriculum. There's not gonna be this like magical leader. That's not gonna happen. And
yeah,
if we keep on waiting for that and don't see that it's us, us as individuals, us as a team that actually has to do the work, we're
yeah,
going to be in this kind of conundrum for a long time, spinning our wheels over and over again, talking about the same stuff. Okay.
yeah,
So we got to recognize our own power to change things. There's a lot of things we have the power and authority to do in this work that we got to just make. The very last thing, change anything. It's a big reason why, again, like this whole gifted in color conversation is something that I'm very excited about hosting this space and creating this space for folks in Austin, April 12th to 14th. This feeling that, like, I think it's weird that when it comes to athletics,
hmm
we understand that, like, we gotta, like, show out, right? Kids have the opportunities to develop these talents. They gotta do AAU, gotta do this, maybe something in the off season. Like, we're very, very intentional about that. Like, if a kid starts playing the piano by ear at 7 years old, we're like, oh, shoot. Let's get that kid some piano lessons, do this, like music theory. Like we're gonna invest in that. We're gonna see it. And there's this thing where when it comes to the intellectual ability,
hmm
there's so much shenanigans that have happened with black folks in particular in education,
hmm
right? I understand standardized testing, eugenics. I understand gifted programs, segregation, white flight. I understand all of that.
hmm hmm
And I need us to stop being so uncomfortable with the idea that we actually need to invest very intentionally in black and brown kids and indigenous kids who intellectually are slaying it. If we
Yeah,
don't do that, we get to the reality where I can ask any leader of an alternative school,
yeah.
how many of the kids do you believe their biggest problem is that they're too smart for their own good? Almost 95%.
Mm,
There were square peg, round hole kids. And the thing is, no one ever figured out what to do with their brilliance. My dad should have been an entrepreneur, innovator, designer. Instead, he was a cocaine trafficker.
mm.
I don't want to break down all the skill sets involved in what he did,
There's a bunch. Yeah,
but I think we left a lot of genius on the table.
yeah,
And I'm tired of leaving genius on the table. And I need us to change our level of comfort when it comes to brilliance.
mm,
We see it. We know it. When we recognize it, the same way we see athletic talent, the same way we see whatever. Like, and granted, everyone does PE still, right? Like, I like to pretend that I can hoop. I can compete. Okay? I'm gonna be in there. But like the way my body is set up, there's no amount of coaching that's gonna get me to play for the Phoenix Suns. Maybe the New York Knicks. Who knows? Every once in a while they hire anybody to be on the New York Knicks, but not the Suns, right? So I look at these things and I'm like, all right, I'm okay with that.
yeah,
But there's intellectually things that I was very, very privileged to have developed and nurtured in me, but it shouldn't be a privilege. You shouldn't even have had an honors class. It shouldn't be an honor to get work that's challenging. We got to stop acting like critical thinking is a luxury good. We have the power to change that. And we have to really change our attitude towards the brilliance of our kids in the struggle. Because the second we do that, it really will be a sky is the limit sort of universe.
Real quickly, I want to say, man, thank you. You know, since we met, it was almost a year ago now. I followed your work, follow the things that you do, and I'm grateful that there are folks like you working in the same spaces because when I am struggling with dreaming bigger, there are folks like you who challenge me to reframe that. So I'm grateful for you, brother. Grateful for your work and what you do. For those who maybe this is the first time ever getting and hearing you, how can folks get in contact with you, support your work, and connect with you?
Sure. So you can check out our work at thinklaw.us. You can request a quote to have us do work with your school or look at our curriculum. We also have the B Project. The B Project is where we are actually changing the face of who gets to teach gifted, so we can change the face of who gets to be gifted. So this is the program that we started, a nonprofit that's really investing in helping Black, Brown, and Indigenous educators earn their gifted credentials, AP credentials, so that they can deliver these things and just really create a very different experience around brilliance. And then again, like look up giftedincolor.com. We've got a really, really excited lineup of things happening for that. And that's happening out in April, in Austin, April 12th through 15th. And I think, follow me on Twitter. Colin ECL, probably am there the most, but follow our work at Think Law US on Instagram, Twitter, wherever you do your social media stuff at. So, yeah.
Any final thoughts before we wrap up, man?
No, I just appreciate this. I think it's really important to consistently remind ourselves that liberation does require imagination. And there's no point, even in the most mundane periods you get. I know a lot of y'all, like, you got that period before spring break where you be like, man, ain't no vacation in sight. You can start to feel very much that same kind of pattern. Still, these are the times where imagination matters the most. Like, how you getting mad when kids are off the chain when you are actually off the chain? Like, you are actually losing it. So if you're losing it, what do you expect they gonna do? How we gotta switch it up?
I literally just had that conversation today, brother. Literally.
For sure, man. Appreciate it.
That's great, man. Thank you for your time, brother. Time well spent, and I hope our teachers are encouraged by you.